welcome back to Drinks Coach. I know I do most of my output on Instagram these days, and I hope you do follow me on VineSack. There's a video every day, but I get, unfortunately, multiple numbers of followers doing that than concentrating on this, which is really more my love, my pride and joy, and really kind of is a library of chats that I have with you that I want to keep. Why a library of information that I can pass on to people. So when I come across something which I think will be genuinely instructive and genuinely informative and educational, I like to do it as a drinks coach, even if I might only get 170 or 200 viewers. I'm hoping that some of them might be Master of Wine students or diploma students or something like that, or level 3. Um, and today I've got a real treat for you. I've been doing a lot of videos on wines that I saw at the giant Hallgarten tasting this year. There's over 900 wines available. I only had one afternoon to film them, so I got some samples sent to my house, which is very nice. And that's the only reward I get for doing these is I do actually have wine to drink afterwards. But it is completely my own um, artistic endeavor, my own editorial. They don't tell me what to taste. I only do things that get me really excited. As you know, there I am, Joe Wadsack, VineSack, at VineSack on Instagram if you want to look at lots of videos from the aforementioned tasting. Today, say here, especially in cost and light of the cost of Burgundy, we have these incredibly handsome fellows to talk to you about. I think they're just off shot there, isn't it? There we go. These are Chablis. This is William Fevre. William Fevre is absolutely one of the great Chablis houses of Chablis. Chablis, as a region, is counted into Burgundy, somewhere between Côte d'Or and the Côte de Bar in the south of Champagne. It specialises in producing wines of extraordinarily high minerality by way of the fact there used to be sea there, and all of the special soils, the Premier Cru and Grand Cru soils, are made up of thousands of years of build-up of oyster fossils. We call this Kimmeridgian chalk. There is also Jurassic limestone around where they make very good Chardonnay, sometimes often sold as Petit Chablis. But Chablis as itself is really famous for its chalk soils and the styles of wines that results in. So Hallgarten very kindly, because they're now the new agent for William Fevre, um, sent me some samples that were left over from the tasting. Now, this is a big deal because when I first started drinking William Fevre back in the day, you could buy a bottle of Village Chablis for about $7.99. Premier Cru Chablis was in the mid-teens. Now, the top crus from William Fevre, get ready for it. For Premier Crus, this is trade prices, by the way. So whack an extra 25% on if you're buying it in a shop. £48 for the Premier Crus and £100 for the Grand Cru. So let's call that more like 60, 69.99 and 129.99, let's say, in an independent wine shop near you. Wow. I mean, how good are they? I mean, how good could they possibly be to be that expensive? Well, like everything, things that are expensive aren't necessarily about good and bad. They're about demand and supply. And it was once said that more wine is sold in the world with the name Chablis on the label than Chablis in fact makes per day than Chablis actually makes in an entire year. It's the most defrauded wine brand in the world and probably the most famous white wine name. It's been around since, sort of like, the crooners of the 40s talking about Chablis and a glass of wine with oysters and so forth. But where are we at? William Fevre, who is William Fevre? Who was William Fevre? Well, I think he retired back in the late 90s. I think he set up this negociant in the 50s, or from 58 to about 98, I think, roughly. Is that right? I don't know. I'll have a look it up. But then the house was acquired by the Pinot family, the luxury brands that own some incredibly expensive estates. But then there's more recently been bought by Henriot, who owns Nicolas Feuillat, the world's largest champagne brand. So the acquisition happened relatively recently, a couple of years ago, and Fevre continues on the rise and rise, certainly in price anyway. Okay, so I'm going to try and do this in a way that actually isn't too confusing. I'm putting these wines down, and then we're going to talk as quickly as I can about Chablis. Okay, this is Chablis. This is a region, a very small region. It doesn't take long to drive around here, but in the centre there somewhere, you'll see the town of Chablis, and you'll see a little bit of red stuff there, which is where the 7 Grand Crus butt up against each other. Incredibly small amount of space. It's a small amphitheatre of vines at best, which explains if there is a global demand for Grand Cru Chablis, there's not a lot to go around, which explains the prices quite simply. And these yellow and orange sites which go off at angles that basically are ripples of hills, more or less south facing, although in fact some face almost north now, are the Premier Cru sites where the chalk build-up has allowed the wines to have that fantastic identity, but maybe not the amount of sun exposure that this amphitheatre, which is beautifully sited sort of south-southwest, getting the most sunshine in the day. So the wines here, especially with the steep hills and the white soils, ripen the grapes to a level which is actually probably very similar in some years to the Côte d'Or wines like Meursault, Pouilly Montrachet, that sort of thing. And they're certainly thought about in the same breath. But these wines are wines of austerity. This whole area produces wines which are very gastronomic. They're wines that taste fantastic with food like oysters and lobster, by way of the fact that they're very incisive, incredibly tight, what the French call serré, or it's called locked. They also use the phrase, which is a wonderful phrase for Chablis, charnu, or chiseled, like out of rock, literally the wine chiseled out of rock. Implication being these wines have incredible depth of minerality. Minerality is quite a controversial word these days, but a wine that tastes of minerals, it really does. I wouldn't say almost saline, I would say, but the textural components in the wine, it's almost like licking cold marble. There's a stoniness sort of stitched through the wines, and there are very famous Premier Crus and very famous Grand Crus. Um, I think it's not uncommon, and I'm kind of one that really believes this. It's not uncommon to feel that if you want to show someone what Chablis does and what makes Chablis special, you show them a Premier Cru wine because the balance between the minerality and that stoniness and the ripeness of the grapes in the top sites is kind of more in tune with what Chablis is all about. It kind of it's stones and minerals first, and then you have this wonderful, silky, sleek, sometimes much more aggressive mineral quality, and then you've got this ripeness behind it. Where if you go to somewhere like I don't know, Bougros or Les Clos, I'm going to show one of those in a minute. One of the big, powerful Grand Cru sites. The wine has amazing mouthfeel and richness. It's actually just a Burgundy in many, many ways, and then that wonderful sort of chalkiness and the chalky depth really kind of plays out in the aftertaste, or in fact when the wine is much older. These wines age incredibly well. They've got a very, very low pH, which means a very high titratable acidity, very stable in terms of its biology and its hydrogen makeup. So these wines can take a very, very long time to come around. So if you're paying 45 quid for one of these, you are recommended to keep them for about 15 years before you drink them. And in some cases, these wines will be perfectly drinkable probably in 2060. I'm not sure I'm still going to be here then. Let's hope. Eh? Anyway, so yes, that's Chablis. Small area. That's it. That's the whole of it. I'm going to put that down. Let's talk about wine. Okay, so I'm going to kind of do most of this as a mime now because I can't do everything on the screen in the same go. Chablis there. The Grand Cru vineyards are here. We'll do 2 Grand Cru vineyards second, but I'm going to do a pair of Premier Cru vineyards first, not from Mondemilia and Vaucopan this way, but on the other side, where the valleys point up slightly, so they have a little bit of a cooler aspect, more herbiness in some cases. And the one above of these two, the one most northerly, we're going to show you, is Vaillant. So that's this fella here. Where are we? Vaillant. So you can see that. There's Chablis Premier Cru Vaillant. And then we're going to compare it to Chablis Premier Cru Montmain. Montmain, further south, it's the next valley down or 2 valleys down, but it's kind of the most southerly aspect of Premier Cru vineyards, and it has very, very good aspect. It has very, very deep, very profound chalk soils, and um, it has more of an aggressive salinity, I would say, than Vaillant further up, which has a slightly more ephemeral yellow nectarine, fruit forward peach quality about it. I would say something along those lines. So let's see if they really are that different. You're making two wines exactly the same way, probably from exactly the same clones, in fact, of Chardonnay. They're made in the same winery by the same person, using the same yeasts in the same tanks, using the same amount of wood. In this case, the wood is very, very restrained, but it is used, and a little bit more. I think about half of the wood used in the Grand Cru is in fact new. That although with the intensity of the wine, you wouldn't know it. So let's hit me up with this. By the way, you can see these wines were opened. They weren't sent to me open; they were sent to me shut. Um, but my wife and I were having dinner last night. I thought, wouldn't it be nice to have some Chablis tonight while we watch the gala ice skating at the Winter Olympics, which we did. Also, these wines are so austere that I would normally decant them. I did decant any super premium young Chardonnays. They do need air, just like red wine. Seriously, if you haven't tried it before, go and try it. Just get a jug, pour your young reserve South African Chardonnay into a jug before you pour it into a glass, and it gives you much more harmony. It allows the wine to oxidize just a little, just to start the whole aromatic process going in a much more dramatic way, and it's really important. So I knew that these wines would be more expressive and taste better today if we drank half of them last night, which we did. Okay, so there we are. On one side we've got Vial. Oh dear, it's pretty hard to pull these stoppers out. There we go. Okay, so I've got to drink these because they're the two glasses I washed. Okay, right. Vial. Here we go. Very, very pale wine. Can you see how pale Chablis is? It's always kind of silver steely. Typically, other characteristics that you find in Chablis are not just born out from the soils they're grown in. They smell of oyster shells, and you get that profound sense that there was something marine involved somewhere. Also, the wines are aged on the lees, like they do in Muscadet with Moulin de Bourgogne, but this is really where it's done with most prestige. And by leaving the dead yeast cells, fine lees in the barrels or in the tanks, the wine produces incredible pinpoint precision, but this wonderful breadth and richness at the same time. It's a real kind of oxymoron almost. And I'm afraid you have to pay 50 quid to find out what I'm talking about. So, oh, this wine smells of green lily stems, yellow, white flowers, magnolia, uh, Comus pear, um, Grafensteiner, or premium, an aromatic apple variety. Um, we are, remember, really quite far north, and although climate change has changed things so that we can grow table wine from Chardonnay in the UK, these wines are actually made in a region where it's very, very hot in the day, and you're right in the side of in the interior of a country, and it's very cold at night. So, ironically, although the temperature oscillates enormously, the average temperature in Chablis over the year is slightly less than Manchester. Doesn't rain as much. Anyway, okay, right. Oh, holy moo moo. That wine tastes so much nicer than it did yesterday. It's softened, had a chance to breathe, get up, wake up, have a bit of a stretch, and it's got an incredible gentle nature to it. Um, the fact that it's been open overnight would probably have accelerated its aging by a year or two, so this wine's now not quite as tightly coiled as it was when we first opened it yesterday. It's almost too cold out of the fridge, but absolutely delicious. Very, very silky. I think I mentioned that before. Vaillant is a silky cru. I think there's very famous producer Vincent Davissa who has a vineyard called Séché, which is not far from here, which reflects this, but also has a vineyard called Les Forêts in Montmartre, which is his own lieu dit, his own sort of like named territory within the Grand Cru. And if you want to spend three times this on his incredible Chablis, they're even more expressive than these lovely wines are. Ah, okay. All the silk and the perfume has disappeared and has been replaced by crab apple, more toothsome, dry, firm acidity. It's more kumquat, less lemon, but also more flavour too. So less aromatic, but more punch for your lunch. Absolutely delicious. I can't imagine how nice that would be with a nice a lobster thermidor or something like that. But you can see why Chablis is always talked about in the breath of the finest shellfish. And if you go to somewhere like La Coupole in Montparnasse in Paris and have the big fruit de mer, this is the only way to fly. If you're going to spend £100 on the shellfish, spend a couple £100 on the wine. Don't do it very often, but it's an experience you need to have to really know what the best of seafood and wine can give you. Mm. So these are going to go down here. Now we're concentrating on the tiny bit of land. We've got Chablis, the amphitheatre just north of Chablis, where these two lovebirds come from. On this side of the screen, you've got Les Preux, which is right up at the top. It's the most northerly of the crews, just about. It's next to um, La Moutonne, which is a monopole owned by Long de Paquis, a producer I'm very, very fond of. Um, and is actually, La Moutonne actually kind of, I think, kind of inveigles into Preux. There's a funny little strip of Petit Chablis across the top, owned by, I can't remember who it is, Daniel Hughes. I can't remember somebody, but produces extremely good Chablis. Even though it's Petit Chablis, it's absolutely delicious. It's just there isn't the soil structures there. So along the top, right on the hog's back, you can produce these extraordinary white wines, which can be bought for really good prices, under £30, I think, anyway, even now. Anyway, so next to it's this Preux, most northerly, probably the sunniest aspect. It's almost slightly north facing, so this wine has a wonderful elegance to it, and it has a wonderful florality. But remember, these wines are, by comparison to the other wines, more oaky, more concentrated, have an age potential of at least a quarter of a century, even though they're white wines. And Les Clos, which is further down. If you're in the amphitheatre, you've got Les Preux at the top, and you go down past the Grenouille, which is owned by Les Chablisiens. You go down to the bottom, and it's quite a big crew. But this is seen to be, I think, the most prestigious and the most age-worthy and the grandest of the Grand Cru, and that's Les Clos. There we go. Absolutely fantastic. Grand Cru Les Clos. For my mind, if you want a kind of a comparison to something else, it's a bit like if you're looking for the best vineyards in Chablis, sorry, the best vineyards in Champagne, you go to Le Menil in Côte de Blanc. And in fact, Krug makes a wine called Le Clos du Menil, which costs £1,000 these days. Les Clos is that bit of incredible age-worthy, very, very intense Chardonnay, which Chablis owns. I don't know how many owners are within Les Clos, but it's certainly not a monopole. There are several producers. I don't know if it's several or multiple severals, but uh, William Fevre does own a sizable amount of the surface area of most of the Grand Crus. And I think it's the largest owner of Grand Cru vineyard, certainly. It might be one of the largest, if not the largest, Premier Cru owner as well. So big stakeholders in the region. So Preux first. There's a hint of banana. The wine is so far less evolved compared to the Premier Cru. You've got a little bit of those banana esters, but they're beautifully stitched in. It's not fruity like a cheap white. It has a silky banana fool quality, which leads into smell of acacia, so vanilla, lilac, custard apple, something much more substantial and extractive. There's a hint of guava, but it's nothing. There's nothing tropical about it, but it has these kind of nuances. It's very complex, even though it's still very quiet. This is the 2023. Sorry, I didn't mention that. These are all 2023, which is a good vintage. A vintage apparently for drinking relatively young, although these wines do need like 20 years. So it's a bit of a joke there, really, that although in 23 these wines still are nowhere near ready to drink. 22 was a small high acid vintage. 21 was a fantastic vintage with more, I suppose, typically Chablis results. But again, those wines keep forever. So probably easier to drink the 23 than the 21 at the moment. Mm. Pure silk. It's just cream. Just so creamy in the mouth. Wonderful minerality. It's only just now that you reach the end of the palate and the acidity comes pulling in. Got this mouth watering tingle of super intense fruit, which quietly whispers to you in the background. It's like, quiet power is how I describe Prayers. There we go. So let's have a look at Les Clos. How different can they possibly be? They're only a few minutes walk apart. Immediately on the nose, you're getting a nose of some of the things you might find in, again, premium Central Coast Côte d'Or Burgundy. For the first time, I'm seeing hazelnuts and peanuts in here, cashew that you get in something like a Pouligny. gigantic flavours, quietly spoken. Mayor lemon, sugar melon. There's a real meloniness, that kind of slight, wonderful Galia melon funk underneath. And then that lovely nutty, oh, oh, extraordinary wine. And really only showing 1%, a glimpse of what it's going to when it's fully going. If we drank this in 2040, it would be full of lime marmalade. It would have streaks of honey through it. These wines tend to be very grand, very aromatic wines indeed, but they always keep that shape, that flow, that svelte, athletic sleekness. Everything's in skeins. It's like when you're drinking wines like this, when you're looking for flavors in your mind, it's like searching for opal in striations in the wine. I think that's a nice way to describe it because it's a very stony wine, the stoniest of all. Anyway, there you go. Thank you, Hallgarten. Thank you, William Fevre. And hopefully that's a lesson on Chablis that you can see a guy enjoying Chablis, explain it to while he drinks it. Quite a useful little skit, that, I think. Come and see me soon. Yeah, this will be the last drinks coach for a little while, I think. But keep following me, Vinesack, on Instagram. See you next time.